all those moments will be lost in time.
Hey guys, what's up and welcome back to my channel. So today we're going to be talking about another crime. Now, if you've been following me for a while, you know that crimes against children get me particularly irate, mainly because children are defenseless, typically quite pure, and why am I explaining myself? Crimes against children are terrible. Indiana's most infamous crime 50 years later. The details of her demise revealed at the 1966 trial defy belief. Here, a peek at the lives of the participants in the murder of Sylvia Likens 50 years later. Buckle up, guys. This one's rough. It was called the most terrible crime ever committed in Indiana, and half a century later, the title still holds. On October 26, 1965, police found Sylvia Likens' emaciated corpse, covered with more than 150 wounds ranging from burns to cuts, sprawled on a filthy mattress in the Indianapolis home of 37-year-old Gertrude Baniszewski, mother of 7 and the architect of the girl's gruesome death. One thing that drives me absolutely up the wall is when people who are trusted to take care of a child end up being the child's worst nightmare. I genuinely have no empathy for people like that. The details of her demise revealed at the 1966 trial defy belief. Sylvia's carnival worker parents boarded her and her sister Jenny with Baniszewski for $20 a week. But when one of their checks arrived late, Baniszewski took out her frustration by beating the girls. Weeks of escalating horror followed. The attacks focused almost exclusively on Sylvia, grew ever more violent and sadistic. Several of Baniszewski's children and a gaggle of neighborhood kids, some as young as 10, watched or joined in. None reported what they saw. I have to say, what has me even more fucked up is that Baniszewski got kids to join in because, first of all, kids can be cruel to other kids. I say as someone who was bullied, so I'd know. You're getting kids to join in on something, especially the younger children. The ones that are older teens, I don't really know how to even contextualize that, but the younger children from the neighborhood, I think it's really fucked up to involve any kid in the first place, but especially the younger ones who don't understand the consequences of what they're doing, because it's like you're egging them on to do something that you as an adult know is not okay, but that they're gonna maybe hate themselves for their whole lives for doing. A lot of people have compared this to The Lord of the Flies, says attorney Natty Bumpo, a former Indianapolis Star reporter who covered the case. But that was just a bunch of controlled children. In this case, they had an adult supervising what they were doing. It wasn't children going wild, it was children doing what they were told. What's even more mind-boggling is that the crime's perpetrators all eventually walked free, some after absurdly short prison sentences. Here's what's happened to this tragedy's principal players. It stuns me, it truly stuns me how ineffective laws can be in terms of actually charging people who are guilty of crimes. I've seen so many cases that are open and shut, even for me. Meanwhile, people who had a fucking ounce of weed on them are locked up for 20 years. But anyway, let me not go off about that. Gertrude Baniszewski, time served 20 years. Originally found guilty of first-degree murder, Gertrude, or Gertie as she was sometimes called, nobody cares, was sentenced to life in prison, a judgment confirmed by a 1971 trial. During her years at the Indiana Women's Prison, she was considered a model prisoner and earned the nickname of Mom. In spite of widespread public outcry, she was paroled in 1985, she moved to Iowa, changed her name to Nadine Van Fossen, and died of lung cancer on June 16, 1990. She never took responsibility for her crimes, claiming she couldn't remember her actions. I never thought she was insane, Bumpo says. I thought she was a downtrodden, mean woman. It's particularly frustrating to me that she was a model prisoner and they called her Mom. Like, I thought in prison people are hated for crimes against children. Why are you calling her Mom? Like, if anything, she's the evil, distant mom who actually tortured a child. What makes that? Okay. let me just move on. Paula Baniszewski. When Gertrude, sickly asthmatic, didn't feel up to disciplining Sylvia, she relied on her oldest child, Paula, to help out, which she did enthusiastically. She was 17 at the time, and it was rumored that she and Sylvia disliked each other from the start. In 1966, Paula was convicted of second-degree murder, but when her conviction was overturned in 1971 on a technicality, she pleaded guilty to voluntary manslaughter rather than face a trial. She got 2 to 21 years, but in despite of attempting a prison break, she was paroled in March 1972 and released completely in March 1974. She changed her name to Paula Pace and wasn't heard from again until 2012, when she was discovered living in the small Iowa hamlet of Marshalltown and working for the school system in the neighboring town of Conrad. Pace/Baniszewski, the mother of 2 grown sons, wasn't charged with any additional crime, but was fired from her job for providing false information on her employee application. Since then, she has once more slipped off the grid. Okay, I'm glad she got fired, because I would not want someone like that working around children. Absolutely not. I mean, realistically, I wouldn't want someone like that working anywhere close to anyone ever, you know, drop her off on some remote island and leave her. To me, the fact that both the quote-unquote mother and the sister changed their names is an admission of guilt, and of course, you know, in a certain way, it's a strategic choice because you don't want people to keep contacting you or finding out who you are and stuff like that. But at the same time, it's also like, if I was so sure that I wasn't guilty of something, would I give in and change my name? Probably not. And that's just my interpretation. They might see themselves as the most innocent people on earth. It's interesting that that's a common thread between the perpetrators of this crime. Stephanie Baniszewski, time served, none. The second oldest of the Baniszewski children, Stephanie was 15 at the time of the crime. Though she admitted to participating to some degree in Sylvia's abuse, she was granted a special trial and all the charges against her were dropped, likely because she agreed to turn state's evidence against her family. She reportedly changed her name, married, had children, worked as a teacher, and now lives in Florida. See, the thing is, it becomes more complicated as there are younger and younger people involved, because I have difficulty discerning what is actually them, you know, potentially having weird tendencies towards violence and what's them doing what an adult is telling them to do. Does that make sense? If you're 17, I have less empathy because it's like you're 1 year away from adulthood. Like, I think you can understand the consequences. If you're 15 and you're potentially being manipulated by an adult, then it's harder for me to tell how aware you are of what you're doing. John Baniszewski, time served 2 years. The third oldest of the Baniszewski children, an active participant in Sylvia's torture. John was 12 when she died. Convicted of manslaughter, he became the Indiana State Reformatory's youngest inmate, serving just 2 years before being released. He changed his name to John Blake and drifted aimlessly before experiencing a religious epiphany that he said helped him see the error of his ways. Allegedly the only member of the Baniszewski clan to show public remorse for his deeds. He made no attempt to hide his past and even spoke about it publicly on occasion. Reportedly a lay minister and real estate agent with a wife and 3 children, he died of cancer in 2005 at age 52. In a masterpiece of an understatement, he once told a reporter, "My mom was a very selfish, self-centered woman." It's also strange to me that out of, 4 people, 2 got cancer. That is alarming. But I am glad to hear that at least he showed remorse and didn't run away from it. Like, I think this is probably the best reaction out of all of them, because it seems like everyone else was kind of pretending that it didn't happen or like they weren't guilty. But for him to show remorse publicly, I think is, I mean, the best thing you can do. It's not like you can ever really fully atone, but at least if you make sure to be clear that you don't feel good about it, that's important. Plus he was 12, so I can't really imagine him fully understanding what he was doing. Marie Baniszewski, time served, none. Fourth of the eldest Baniszewski children, Marie was 11 when the torture took place. No charges were brought against her. She testified during the trial. The sole member of the Baniszewski family took cry on the stand during questioning. She still reportedly lives in Indiana. Honestly, I'm kind of wondering how traumatized, especially the younger children who didn't really understand what was going on or what they were doing. I can't imagine the trauma of seeing your sister essentially being murdered and beat up by a gang of other children. Shirley Baniszewski, time served, none. Fifth of the Baniszewski children, Shirley was the youngest of the family to actively participate in Sylvia's torture. Although the 10-year-old heated a needle that was used to burn the victim, she was never charged with any crime. Her whereabouts today are unknown. Any of the young children who were being actively violent, like heating up a needle, that would never even occur to me. But I think they should have not necessarily gone to jail, but have gotten some kind of mental treatment, because first of all, like I mentioned before, the trauma, but aside from that, what kind of tendencies are you showing by doing this at that young of an age? It could be you showing that there's something wrong with you mentally or that you're strangely aggressive. Just generally speaking, I would have them go to intensive therapy because you can't be okay after something like that. There's no way, even if you're a good intentioned little kid. James Baniszewski, time served none. Because he was only 8 at the time, James was not arrested nor called to testify, although some reports suggested he played a role in the crime. Of all the Baniszewski offspring, the least is known about him. Dennis Lee Wright Jr., the youngest of the Baniszewski children. Dennis was a newborn when Sylvia met her fate. He was the son of Gertrude's lover, Dennis Lee Wright Sr., who abandoned the family shortly after his namesake's birth. Supposedly, he was placed in foster care and was later adopted by the White family, who changed his name to Denny Lee White. He died in 2012 in California. Coy Hubbard, a time served 2 years. A neighborhood kid and Stephanie Baniszewski's boyfriend, Hubbard was a full participant in Sylvia's torture. His contributions include using her as a practice dummy for judo flips and punching and shoving her down the basement stairs. Convicted of manslaughter, he served only 2 years before being released. His attorney, Forrest Bauman Jr., remembers running into him in the early 1970s when he stopped at a near downtown gas station where Hubbard happened to work. He was very effusive and said, "Come inside, I want to introduce you to my boss," Bauman recurs. "I said, sure." That was the last contact I had with him. Oddly, Hubbard never changed his name, reportedly remained in the Indianapolis area most of his adult life. He was tried for another murder in 1982, but acquitted. He also reportedly lost his job in 2007 when the movie An American Crime about Sylvia Likens' case debuted. He died in June that year in Shelbyville. Frankly, this might be the second person I have the biggest issue with after the mother figure, because first of all, he was her boyfriend, Sylvia's boyfriend, that is. That is disgusting, and I have to say it makes me shiver, the whole thing of using her as a practice dummy for judo flips. You guys know I don't like diagnosing anyone with anything, but the fact that he did that and then was acquitted for another murder, I don't think that's a coincidence. Like, I think something's wrong there. Who doesn't hear alarm bells when someone does that when they're a teen and then later are acquitted from a murder? Don't you think maybe, this person has been in a lot of weird, violent crimes. Why might that be? Richard Hobbs, time served 2 years. Another neighborhood kid who tortured Sylvia. Hobbs performed the infamous act of helping carve the words, "I am a prostitute and proud of it," into her stomach with a large needle. The macabre task was begun by Gertrude, but when she became too fatigued to finish, Hobbs stepped in. Convicted of manslaughter, he served a short sentence and died of cancer in 1972 at age 21. What is with all these people dying of cancer? Is that a weird form of karma? I'm just kind of surprised at the amount. There aren't that many people, and I know cancer isn't the rarest thing in the world, but nonetheless, it surprises me. Lester C. Likens. Listen, there's never any good news with someone called Lester. Sylvia's father was a carnival worker who decided to leave his kids with a third party while he and his wife, Betty, were on the road. His only crime was that he didn't vet the Baniszewskis' home more thoroughly before leaving 2 of his daughters in Gertrude's custody. He and Gertrude got to talking, and she said she would take care of the children and treat them like her own. He recalled at the trial. Lester apparently believed her because during several subsequent trips to the house, the last on October 5th, just weeks before his daughter's death, he noticed nothing out of order. Not that there was much to see, considering the only portions of the Baniszewskis' abode he ever entered were the living room and once the kitchen. He reportedly died in February 2013 at the age of 86 in Fontana, California. I can't conceptualize of just leaving your kids with someone you haven't thoroughly vetted. Mind you, would he have known that the mother, Gertrude, was a bad person? Maybe not, because some people are very good at hiding it, but nonetheless, it's irresponsible. Betty Likens. Visibly devastated, Sylvia's mother gave only short responses on the witness stand at the trial. She divorced Lester in 1967, remarried, and died on May 29th, 1988 at age 71. She was buried in Crown Hill Cemetery, where she shares a headstone with her brother. Diana Likens. In the midst of the ordeal, Sylvia's sister Jenny, who was also boarded at the Baniszewskis, reportedly called their older sister Diana for help. Believing that girls were simply grumbling, Diana initially ignored the plea, but her suspicions were raised when Gertrude wouldn't let her in the house for a visit. She then spotted Jenny, who wasn't allowed to talk to her, and ran away. Diana contacted social services, but when a worker showed up at the Baniszewski residence, Jenny told her, on threat of punishment from Gertrude, that Sylvia had run away. No further action was taken. Diana made headlines recently when she and her husband, Cecil Paul Knutson, both both diabetics, got lost in the California backcountry and were stranded in their car for 2 weeks with nothing to sustain them but rainwater, a pie, and some oranges. Knutson didn't survive the ordeal, dying of a heart attack after the first week. Diana, near death, was discovered and rescued by off-roaders. Listen, at least Diana called the services. At least she tried to do something. I think that's probably one of the most admirable things people have done so far, but it is really shitty that the services didn't pick up on anything wrong, because you think that they'd look a little bit deeper than just be like, oh yeah, she ran away, okay, bye. Jenny Likens. Perhaps because she was crippled by polio, Jenny didn't suffer nearly as much abuse as her sister Sylvia did. From the beginning, she had opportunities to tell neighbors what was going on, but she didn't because she feared she would make things worse. Indeed, one of the enduring mysteries of the case is why neither she nor Sylvia sought for help before things escalated. I speculate there was never any experience in Sylvia's life up to the time she went into Gertrude's house when she learned people would come to her aid, says Bauman, Hubbard's attorney. She wasn't conditioned to believe that anyone would help her. Sylvia finally succumbed to her injuries after months of torture. Hobbs, the neighborhood kid, contacted the police to report the death. When the police arrived to collect her sister's body, Jenny reportedly told them, "You get me out of here and I'll tell you everything." A Beech Grove resident, she died in 2004 at the age of 54. I feel like reading this just drained my energies just because of how absolutely fucking disgusting this is. I can't imagine what Sylvia went through. And I think, of course, the violence is terrible. Does that have to be said? No. But the idea that people around you, and worse, people close to you, would do that to you is so absolutely disgusting for your last moments of life. Your boyfriend, your essentially mother figure, your siblings participating in something like that, especially the older ones who know full well what they're doing. It's nauseating, and it makes me really mad that some of these people got barely any time considering the crime. And it scares me that some of these people are still out and about, because I don't think anyone could be mentally stable after A, being traumatized by seeing it, and or B, by taking part. Anyways, guys, I'm very curious to know if you hold the younger children accountable, or how do you feel about the younger kids? Of course, an 8-year-old I don't necessarily hold accountable, but I'm more thinking about the 15-year-old and the ones that are older but not necessarily adults yet, because I think they have a better grasp, yet maybe not a full grasp of what they were doing. So let me know what you think in the comments down below. Thank you guys so much for watching. Thank you to my patrons as always, and let's get right into the fan art.